allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. First order of business tonight is the approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve?
Motion to approve by Mr. Hess, seconded by Mr. Salvatore. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Thank you. Next order of business is student government report. Mr. Mitchell?
We have representatives from student government.
Great.
Good evening. My name is Brianna Nue, and I am the junior class president. Is it on?
And my name is Abby O'Connor, and I am the senior class treasurer.
Last month, we finished our annual turkey basket event. Our goal was to collect enough food for 80 baskets. In the end, we collected a total of 100 turkey baskets and 131 turkeys.
On Tuesday, December 4th, CHS held its open house for incoming freshmen. There, freshman mentors and student government officers gave tours of the school and interacted with potential CHS students. In the Wellness Center, our various clubs and sports teams represented the diversity CHS has to offer. Overall, it was a very successful night.
This month, we also started Adopt a Family, an event where the student government helps out families in need who cannot afford gifts for the holidays. The student government, as well as the rest of CHS, donates money to help these families through the holidays. This year, we have sponsored one family from CHS and 2 families from BF Norton. The presents will be delivered early morning next Tuesday, the 18th.
Also next Tuesday, the 18th, Winter Ball ticket sales will begin. Due to the popularity of the dance, ticket sales will remain the same as last year, and that only seniors can buy tickets for the first 2 days. We will then continue to open ticket sales to each class after a few days. The dance will take place on the 18th of January at Wright's Farm.
Thank you for your time and have a good evening.
Ladies, thank you. All right, next order of business is the approval of minutes from the rescheduled meeting of...
Consent agenda.
Yes, we're in the consent agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Approval of the minutes from the rescheduled meeting from November 26, 2018. Approval of minutes from the executive session from 11/26/2018. The enrollment report from December 1st, 2018. The school police report from November 1st, 2018. And the residency truancy report from 12/1/2018. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Mr. Salvatore. Do I have a second? Second by Mrs. Bernardo. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, 7-1, 7-0. Next is report out of the executive session. We had a meeting tonight upstairs, and there are no votes to report out of the meeting. I need a motion to seal the minutes from executive session.
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Fiorello.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Hess. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, 7-0. Next is the superintendent's report. Mr. Mitchell.
Mr. Chairman, if you could join me down at the podium below the stage. Mr. Costa is here. We have a couple of students that we would like to recognize first. Mike, can you take some pictures?
So Julie Andrade, if you could come up here. Julie Andrade is receiving a letter of commendation for outstanding performance on the preliminary SAT National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test in 2017. About 34,000 commended students throughout the nation are being recognized for their exceptional academic promise. Although commended students will not continue for National Merit Scholarship Awards, Julie did place among the top 50,000 scorers of more than 1.6 million students who entered into the competition. Congratulations, Julie.
Can I just say one thing about what Julie accomplished? I think it's really important to emphasize, as Mr. Costa said, that 1.6 million students take this assessment, and I did the math. Julie's in the top 3%. I was happy being in the top 50%. She was in the top 3%, which is incredibly impressive. So congratulations to you.
I would like to call Jennifer Ramirez up. Jennifer Ramirez is receiving this award for excellence for academic performance, leadership potential, and dedication to serving humanity through the passion of medicine. Jennifer participated in a 3-day National Academy of Future Medical Leaders Conference. Here, world-class speakers and doctors presented inspirational speeches that influenced her and transformed her life goals. It motivated Jennifer to continue on her dream of going into the medical field, especially after being mentored by some of the greatest minds in medicine. These leaders have given Jennifer advice on perseverance and have encouraged her to step out of her comfort zone. Jennifer explains that on the last day of the conference, she was able to watch a live surgery and knew that the program had opened her eyes and helped her in both her future career and personal life. Congratulations, Jennifer.
Christy, can you please come on up? Christy Patton. Christy, can you come stand over here, please? I'm sure you all know by now that Christy Patton has been named the 2019 Assistant Principal of the Year for the state of Rhode Island by the Rhode Island Association of School Principals. So congratulations, Christy. So let me just share some of the really nice things that your friend Beth Coughlin said about you, which we all, those of us that know and work with you, know you and work with you, share these same sentiments. Beth says, Christy's strength and talent lies in the relationships she forms with both students and staff. She makes it a point to know most every student by name, as well as getting to know them on a personal level. When dealing with student behaviors, Christy approaches in a supportive, compassionate way while maintaining high expectations. She communicates with families in a manner that allows them to work through the problem together, offering assistance as needed. The result of her efforts are strong family connections and all students accessing learning despite the challenges they may face. Another significant contribution Christy has made to the school community is her support of our special education programs. Christy frequently jumps in to give the staff a hand by working with students on an academic task, de-escalating a student in crisis, or simply visiting classrooms to provide encouragement. She leads our student support team as well as manages all aspects of PBIS within the school. Her infectious personality resonates among the staff and students, creating a culture of positivity and genuine fun. Christy's work ethic, caring nature, and high level of commitment to her position have had a major impact on the success of North Cumberland Middle School. Students and staff look to Christy for support and guidance, and she does so in a professional and caring manner. It is for these reasons and many more that Christy has been named the 2019 Rhode Island Assistant Principal of the Year. Congratulations, Christy.
don't really feel that hot, so I won't talk to you that. I have a great team at North Cumberland, and as much as this is an award that recognizes me, I truly feel like it's a team award, and I couldn't be as successful as I am without great mentor and support staff, and we just really have awesome kids, awesome families, and all of you, and I know that the other administrators that are here have helped me whenever they could. So it's really, I think of this more as like a North Cumberland award and a district recognition. I couldn't do this by myself. So thank you for everybody for all that you do for me. And I look forward to working here for a long time and continuing to support our families in Cumberland. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I do have just a few other things to report, if I may. As you know, we are meeting regularly to make plans related to the school bond referendum. Mr. Chairman, you have been a part of those meetings. There is much work to be done, and I just wanted to let the school committee know that one of the things that we're considering are a number of options that we have available to us. So, for example, we are meeting regularly on Mondays, and we have conversations about the options that we might want to consider. So, as of right now, there are, I think, like 4 or 5 options that we are considering. And as a result of our most recent meeting, we have thought of a few other things that we might want to consider. So the architect, when we have these conversations, once they have this information, they revise the options that they have presented to us and/or develop new options based on our conversations. So we're meeting again on Monday, and there'll be a point where we have solidified all of the options, and certainly we will be sharing that information with all of you. As you all know, part of the process is for us to hire an owner's project manager, an OPM. An RF, a request for proposal, has been developed, and a meeting actually took place. Alex, what is that called, that meeting? So there was a pre-bid meeting this week, and there were a number of businesses expressing an interest in bidding on this owner's project manager position. So that is in process, and once we have, this position is vital to this process and will be essentially Cumberland's rep in this process to make sure that whatever we decide to do is done correctly, on time, and on budget, those kinds of things. One of the other things that I just wanted to share with all of you, and we mentioned this briefly in the fiscal subcommittee meeting, one of the things that we are considering, which I think will be extremely valuable to us moving forward as part of this facilities project, is this demographic study. It was that we talked about, and we met with an individual whose title is actually a demographer. So he is a PhD level statistician that will consider a number of variables in predicting student enrollment over the next 10 years. And they will actually help us based on where students are residing and where families are with children are residing. They will actually help us to make decisions about what we want to do with our facilities. So I think that study, which will be shared with all of you, will be incredibly helpful to us as we move forward in this process. So lots and lots of work to be done. We are in the process of putting together a building committee, which is required as part of the town charter, and everything that we do will be shared with the building committee. The building committee will have school committee representation as part of that process. The last, I don't know if anybody had any questions about that, but the last thing that I needed to talk to all of you about was the school start time. We have a rather large committee of people who are interested in investigating the potential for a later school start time in September. I think there are 30+ constituents. We have students, parents, administrators, teachers, coaches, the athletic director, a number of individuals who are pretty passionate about this, the need for us to have a later school start time, especially for our high school students. And it's interesting. So we had a meeting last night, and since last night I have received 2 articles, one from actually from 2 teachers who aren't even on the committee, who were passing along information talking about not only the benefit of starting school later, but the need and the health benefit that that it provides for students when they get additional sleep. So I will keep you updated, and as you all know, our goal is to hopefully have a later school start time for high school students in September of 2019, and I'll keep you posted as we move forward in this process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next order of business is the payment of bills. Mr. Hess.
Okay, so fiscal met upstairs earlier this evening. We did approve the payment of bills in the amount of $1,064,994.32. This passed on a 2-0 vote, and I would make a motion to pass that to the full committee.
Mr. Hess makes a motion to payment of bills in the amount of $1,064,994.32. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Salvatore. Any discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, 7-0. Next is Fiscal Management Subcommittee update. Mr. Hess.
Okay, so in addition to paying the bills upstairs, we did have our monthly reports from Sodexo, and things are looking good on their side. Revenues are actually up at the high school. They believe that a new marketing campaign is helping with that. So overall, Sodexo looks good. On the business office side of things, currently the budget is in good shape. It's a little early to start projecting things out, but we do look like we have a positive variance at this point, although special ed spending is up overall for a few different reasons. So we do expect that we will probably go over on the special ed side by a few $100,000 is what we're projecting at this point, based on just additional need and the costs associated with that. But still overall the entire budget picture looks good. The other thing that we're looking at is the pool work is ongoing. We did have some delays on the work with the pool, but we are projecting at this point that the pool work will be finished in early January of 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Hess. Next is Policy and Procedures Subcommittee update.
Yes, Policy and Procedures did meet this past Tuesday. It was our first meeting with our 2 new members. We discussed the social media policy, which is actually a carryover from last year, but because of the shift in members of the subcommittee, we reintroduced the policy. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done with the policy to really separate the personnel from the student side of it, and probably make some more tweaks. We will reintroduce it hopefully either in January or February. And it is up later for a vote, but it was tabled.
Any other question? No. Next is Achievement and Communications Subcommittee update.
The Achievements and Communications Subcommittee did not meet this month, but will be meeting on January 8th.
Next is comments from the public. If anyone has a comment for the school committee, please come up to the podium. None? All right, thank you. So next is public hearings. reading of new policies, J26, social media policy, with a cross-reference to G17, personnel. Mr. Fiorello.
Yes, these policies were tabled in subcommittee, so a reading is not necessary at this
Reading
time.
is not there. And for item number 2,
Yes.
tabled as well. Thank you. So the items were tabled, so there is no public comment at this time. Next is new business, presentation on the results of the Rhode Island Comprehensive Assessment System, RICAS. Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As everyone knows, the RICAS scores were recently released, finally, by the Rhode Island Department of Ed. And one of the reasons why there was such a delay in the release is because one of the concerns was that the performance of Rhode Island students in comparison to the performance of students in Massachusetts was not satisfactory. We, as a state, did not perform all that well, which is understandable for a lot of reasons. Most significantly, Massachusetts has been taking the same assessment for over 20 years, and this is the first year where we're doing the same assessment. That being said, there was one district that did exceptionally well in relation to similar districts demographically. And, you know, this, you know, I need to say that it is not a competition, but, God bless you, it is not a competition, but one of the things that we learn from the results is how well we're doing in relation to our peers. And the good news is, I think everyone has heard, is that Cumberland did exceptionally well. We're not satisfied. We have a lot of work to do. We know that we need to get more students to proficiency or exceed proficiency, but we have been improving over the years, and our performance on the 2018 RICAS assessment, our performance continues to improve. So this validates a lot of the work that we are doing. I think we've made some really good decisions about what we want students to know and be able to do, and that is curriculum. So we've made some really good choices in our decisions on what we want to teach students. And it's important to state that the assessment is assessing what students are expected to know. So this, I think, validates the decisions that have been made around curriculum. It also validates the work that we have been doing with professional development, which is really hard. And I think most importantly, this signifies the tremendous effort that administration and staff has been making to help us get better. So we're not satisfied. We're probably never going to be satisfied. But we, you know, we are, there is comfort in knowing that all of the hard work is paying off. Mr. Damana, our assistant superintendent, and his curriculum coordinators, Kathy Cardoza and Deb Rude, are here to provide you with a presentation on how we're doing. And I have had a chance to spend some time looking at the presentation that they're going to be, and the information that they're going to be sharing with you. They have really, I think one of the things that we do well is we really dig into the data. And all of the administrators, and there are several of them here this evening, are really using data to drive decisions in their schools with teachers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Damana and his team, and they have a nice presentation for you this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Good evening, everyone. So I do have a statement prepared, and I'd like to read it before we start the presentation. In a few moments, Kathy, Deb, and I will be providing you with a district lens on the 2018 RICAS state testing results from last spring. Over the past 10 days, the headlines have captured a grim view of the state's academic standing as it compares to the country's academic standard, the state of Massachusetts. The headline in Cumberland, however, reads a bit differently. Our student achievement levels rival several districts of similar socioeconomic status in Massachusetts. Our elementary and middle schools ranked among the best in the state. With this presentation, we will attempt to provide an analysis that helps synthesize the data for you in a meaningful way. The mission of my office is rooted in two basic principles. First is that we come to work each day with a relentless intent to improve the product we place in front of students. The second is that we pursue how we can improve the professional learning of our teachers in an intentional, ongoing, systematic, and process-oriented manner. The truth is, as many districts and educational entities would agree, is that it takes a tremendous amount of effort and a series of good decisions to even make minimal gains in our line of work. The gains Cumberland has made over the past 4 years should be received as nothing short of remarkable. Our trajectory has been unrivaled. Cumberland has gone from performing adequately as compared to other districts to now one of the leading districts in performance. In my opinion, we are an extremely attractive option for families looking for a quality education for their children. Our teachers, our administrators, and staff should feel extremely proud of the body of work, and on behalf of my office, I want to say thank you to all of your tireless efforts. I would also like to recognize the enormity of the work and the burden that I place on both Kathy and Deb. They work extremely hard alongside me, and through all of our conversations, our disagreements, our productive struggles, our successes together, we remain a team hyper-focused on outcomes. I am fortunate to learn from the both of you, and I so appreciate the bond that we share. With that being said, I encourage town officials, school committee members, and district leadership to continue to work synergistically on a common goal. It is my belief that we provided a return on the investments the town has made in our pursuit of raising student achievement. Maintaining this standing will not be easy. In fact, the work is going to become even more difficult. It is our belief that if we continue to work together to support one another, we can continue on this path of success. So, with that being said, Mike, we'll get this started. We always like to provide a theme for our presentations, and this year, one of the philosophies that we like to embody is a pursuit of proficiency for all students. That's what we feel we owe each and every one of our students in our district. So the first few slides, we took language from presentations from the Rhode Island Department of Education. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on these particular slides, but I do want to orient you to the last bullet. And I'll wait until your position. That's fine. You can wait a moment while you settle. So the state looks at lots of different things and provides us with a plethora of data, but two things that we really look at are one, proficiency levels, and two, this year they wanted us to look at what are called growth scores. And throughout the presentation you will hear us reference growth scores, and we'll explain a little bit about that later. But very simply defined, it explains how a student's change in their learning compares to students who perform similarly to them the prior year. All right, and student growth scores are provided in parent reports, and we'll be looking at those. This next slide is, again, something that we're not going to get really deep into. I just highlighted what I wanted you all to pay attention to, and that is the bold. RICAS has a more difficult performance standard than the PARCC assessment. So this test is more difficult. And what that means is when students are taking this assessment, the rigor has gone up, which means the ability for them to perform, considering meeting those standards, becomes more difficult. So how they're measuring their performance and the criteria that they're measuring their performance against is more difficult for them to achieve meeting the standard or exceeding the standard. Okay, that's about as simply as I can describe something pretty complex. And I always like to include these slides. I used these slides actually about 8 years ago. Dr. Thornton asked me to do a presentation at Town Council, and I like to go back to it because it really, this kind of describes what the state is going through. And it really simply is about, as rigor increases, there is an inverse relationship to achievement. So basically, the more difficult something gets, it's harder to achieve. And one of the things that we like to do is find that point of inertia. So what are those things that we can do as a school department to respond to student needs in order to change the trajectory so that their growth moves along that continuum as rigor gets more difficult for students, okay? So we also want to provide you with the scoring on RICAS. It's a little different than PARCC. PARCC had 5 different indicators on how they measured student performance. RICAS has 4. And if you notice, there are numbers there, the scale score numbers. If a student scores a scale score of 440 to 469, they would have been considered as not meeting expectations. If a student scored a scale score of 470 to 499, they would have been considered partially meeting expectations or would have received a 2. 500 is the cut score for proficiency, meaning any student who hit a scale score of 500 or above, they were considered meeting or meeting expectations. And a lot of the data that you'll see tonight, we combine meeting expectations with exceeding expectations, which is the next scale score indicator, which students who score from a 530 to a 560 are considered receiving a 4 or exceeding expectations on RICAS. So for this presentation, just to set a framework and our mindset around it, for the past 4 years, Cumberland has pursued becoming a top-performing district in the state of Rhode Island. 2018 RICAS results demonstrate what I believe to be a landmark achievement for the town of Cumberland in this pursuit. And with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Kathy.
Okay, so first, we wanted to go back and look over the past 3 years, not counting RICAS, but because we know we can't really do a comparison because the level of rigor has changed. But you can see that there was a steady rise from 2015 to 2017 on PARCC proficiency scores. So as the rigor increased with the Common Core state standards, Cumberland responded to that rigor and grew each year.
So just like Kathy did in looking at the historical data for PARCC, excuse me, I'd like to do the same for ELA. And Kathy so eloquently described that we are just on a steady increase in those first 3 years. 2015 was the baseline, and in 16 and 17, it's really exciting when you can say, if you do X, you can get a Y outcome. So we know in ELA in 16 and 17, we began our diligent work that's still continuing around curriculum mapping. And equally as important is teachers learned about how to explicitly teach writing and give feedback to students around writing.
Thanks. So this next slide is actually an extremely important one, and I'd like for you to take a moment to sort of absorb what this slide has on it. And we are going to need to set a context for you as to why we set this slide up this way. What it is showing you is starting in 2015, and this is representative of ELA performance as it pertains to districts in the state of Rhode Island from 2015 through 2018, so that includes RICAS performance. And what we want to do is talk a little bit about why the slide is set up this way. First is we are a district, so we used districts and district information in this presentation. In other words, not all of the data that was reported by the state were districts or included districts that tested grades 3 through 8. Okay, so that's really significant. So among some of the higher achieving charter schools, they may have tested grades 3 to 4, only 2 grades. They may have just tested grades 3 through 5. So we didn't feel like as though that was an apples to apples comparison. And the other thing that we took into consideration was population size. So in terms of districts, and in terms of districts who tested the same number of grade levels, very important, very key. If you look at the history of where we were to where we have come, that landscape and that profile has changed quite a bit over the past 4 years. In fact, there are districts there that perennially have outperformed us. Strong academic-minded districts, and certainly we have done some work to change that landscape.
And if you notice the asterisk on 2018, we nudged out East Greenwich in our opinion, and here's why. Their percentage of proficiency was 56. If you round up or you round down, we both ended at 56% proficient. And I think that was shown in the newspaper in the Projo. The other thing that we felt, there were 2 other factors that we thought were tiebreakers. One, and Tony is going to be talking about it, is the high growth percent. And that we had more students in Cumberland who scored in the high growth percent than in East Greenwich. They had 39% and we had 49%. So we thought that was a really important tiebreaker. And I think you referred to, Tony, the population itself. We test over 2,100 kids, and they test 1,188. And Tony will talk about the implication of size in a minute. A final footnote is Jamestown, who ranked 3rd in proficiency, their population tested is 317 kids. And as you can see, this is just graphically representative of our growth over 4 years.
So this is looking at our math ranking, and it's not quite as drastic as ELA, but in 2015, we were 9th. We stayed pretty steady in our ranking. 2016, we were 8th. 2017, 9th, even though our percent proficiency increased. But this year, when we gave the RICAS, we had a significant increase, and we were ranked 4th, according to what Mr. DeMana described when we looked at schools that tested the same grades. So Jamestown was not included in the others because they did not test high school, which PARCC tested. RICAS only tested 3 to 8, so that's why it's included. But we'll see later when we look at SES, Cumberland is right up there with Barrington, Jamestown, EG, which has much lower poverty levels than Cumberland. So that was significant that we're ranked number 4 with these districts. This is also just another visual to show the improvement, how we were 9th, 8th, 9th, and then shot up to 4th. I think I am. Okay, so this is the comparison of Cumberland to the state, just for RICAS this year. And you can see Cumberland is in ELA's blue and math is red. So on the left, you can see Cumberland significantly, what was it, 23%?
Yes, 23.
Difference between both math and ELA. So we outperformed significantly Cumberland compared to the state.
And if you look at this slide represents districts, not schools. And we have ELA on the left and math on the right. I'll talk a bit about ELA, and Kathy can talk about math. What I find very fascinating, you know, we know economically disadvantaged, so SES status really has a correlational effect on performance. So if you notice Cumberland, who is ranked 4th, we have 23% poverty, and the 3 districts above us have significantly less poverty rate. So I think that is another factor that can make it difficult to achieve performance and we should feel really great about that.
And similar story in math, and if you notice 1, 2, and 3, Barrington, Jamestown, East Greenwich, they're economically disadvantaged. It's 6%, 10%, and Cumberland's more than double, and they're ranked number 4. So I think it's pretty exciting and shows all of the hard work that's going on in Cumberland.
And we feel really great that we're both 4th in math and ELA. Tony just said, I think the next one's mine. We're fighting over them.
So again, I want to just point out the conversation that we had started at the beginning of the presentation around rigor. So keep in mind that as performance standards have increased over the past 4 years, we have steadily grown with that rigor. So here's an interesting fact that we wanted to share, which I thought was extremely significant as it relates to population. In the research world, I wanted to take a look at population size and how it impacts, data, because I was fascinated with the differences in pop sizes in terms of performance. And when you look at our performance, if you look at this particular slide, of the districts, and there were 8 of them that tested 2,000 or more students, Cumberland ranked number 1 in ELA and number 1 in math proficiency. Okay. Of the districts that tested 1,600 or more students, Cumberland ranked number 1 in both ELA and math, respectively. And of the districts that tested 1,500 or more students, Cumberland ranked number 2 in both ELA and math, second only to Barrington schools.
So we get questioned a lot about how are you doing in relationship to BVP. I think we provided a similar slide last year, so we wanted to do it again. And you can see Cumberland is blue and BVP is red. The first two years of PARCC, they outperformed us. Last year, we nudged them out a bit, and this year, there's a 10% gap between Cumberland schools and BVP. And I think it's represented in the next slide visually. And I think that speaks tremendously to our trajectory. We are the blue line.
And again, similar story in math. You can see the 2015 and 16 scores. BVP outperformed Cumberland. Last year, we outperformed BVP 48% proficient to 44, and this year there was 50% proficient to BVP's 42. So we did include this because we've included it the past 3 years. And this is just a different visual that shows how we've steadily increased as the rigor has increased.
So when you look at this slide, I think we had it last year. What are we doing in relationship to our neighboring communities? Excuse me. The ELA proficiency is in red, and you can see that. Can you read the districts at the bottom? I see people squinting. Cumberland, Lincoln, Smithfield, Burrville, Scituate, North Smithfield. So in ELA, there was one district that outperformed us by 4%, and that was North Smithfield. But I think you can see that, I can't see the numbers. Lincoln. Yeah. Oh, and this is just this year, this year's data.
We tried to pick communities that were close and had similar SES, so we didn't include towns like, or cities like Woonsocket or Pawtucket or Central Falls. We tried to pick the ones that were similar with their economically disadvantaged. And in math, Cumberland outperformed Lincoln, Smithfield, Burrville, Scituate, and North Smithfield.
So this slide is a bit busy, but we wanted to provide you with some what we call, or what we are calling, some baseline school data. In other words, it's a new assessment with new rigor, and we have to know what our starting points are for our school community so we know where we are and where we need to go. So we don't want to spend a lot of time talking about each of the individual schools, and I'll talk a lot about some of the data that we provided in some of our disaggregated data later on in the presentation. But what we tried to do is mirror what the state has asked us to do, which is to look not only at the percent proficient who have met or exceeded their standards, but also looking at the typical and high growth percentages in each of the schools. And as you look at the percent growth in both ELA and math in our schools, we have some impressive statistics. The bottom line is our kids are growing, and they've grown from last year, which means they're learning, they're attending to the curriculum, they're accessing instruction, they're accessing core instruction, and they're growing, which is really important. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the schools' gains a little bit later on.
Okay, so we took a look at rankings compared to all of the other Rhode Island schools. So instead of looking at just district comparisons, we looked at schools. And I thought they were, again, pretty impressive. The rankings, if you look, there are 180 elementary schools that took the RICAS exam. And you can see on the right that we scored it, depending on the school, better than 83% at Ashton, better than 46% at BF Norton, better than 89% at Cumberland Hill, and better than 97% at Community, and better than 69% at Garvin. And our middle schools had very impressive results this year. McCourt School, out of 44 middle schools, was 11th, which was better than 75% of other middle schools in the state. And North Cumberland Middle School was 3rd out of 44, which is better than 93%.
So again, similarly, Kathy described how this is set up, and 180 elementary schools. And to the right, you can see how our schools performed, where they were in the pack. So Ashton performed better than 73% of those schools, 180. BF 38%, Cumberland Hills 70%, Community 97%, Garvin 73%. And McCourt, again, middle schools, because typically in the state, the middle schools are not performing as well. So what we see at McCourt is they scored better than 68%, and NCMS performed better than 93% of the 44 middle schools.
So we won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but we just wanted to provide you again information. The state has talked about releasing what is called an accountability system in school report cards. The information has been released to the superintendent, but it's embargoed until December 19th, so we cannot release that information. But basically, it's a rating system that takes into consideration several factors, and schools and districts are rated based on categories such as percent proficient, absenteeism rates among students and teachers, and subpopulation performance, and also growth rates. So they take all of those factors algorithmically, and they come up with a rating system, and that's what the school report card and accountability system is going to be comprised of. In the future, I'm hearing that science scores will also be a part of the accountability and school report cards in the future. So we talked a lot about these next two slides in my office, and I chose to include them. I won't spend a lot of time on them, but they do share what I think is some important information. We talked a little bit about scale scores. So on an assessment like this, students respond to the what we call items, the questions, and those questions are weighted based on their level of difficulty, and they accrue what are called raw scores. Those raw scores are then converted into scale scores, and a scale score tells us the strength of their performance, all right, or the strength of their aptitude. And 500 being the cut score, when we look at math, we see that there are all but 2 districts that when you take the mean or the average of all of our 3rd graders who tested, all of our 4th graders, all of our 5th graders, and so on and so forth, when you take the average, several of our grade levels scored at the benchmark of proficiency. There are 2 grade levels in math that stand out a bit, 4th and 8th grade, where their scale scores are a bit lower than the others. And what that can tell us as an office is we need to look at our students on average in grade 4 and in grade 8 in terms of math performance didn't do as well, or the strength of their scores wasn't as strong. So from a curriculum standpoint, we need to ask ourselves some questions. We need to dive in, and we need to make some changes, and we need to revise. So that drives the work that we do. The problem is that we only have 4 months to do it in, right? Which poses a big challenge. So in ELA, same setup, scale scores in all of our grade levels 3 through 8. We were at the proficiency mark as a mean or above it, grades 3 through 8. Again, tells us information about, generally speaking, how our curriculum is operating across our schools. That's why it's so important to talk about this on a district level, because we have to span 7 schools. It's not just controlling curriculum or looking at curriculum in one building with one subset population. This is spanning several schools.
So when you look at this slide, Kathy and I spent time because we had not yet released, the Rhode Island schools had not yet released data. So we just wanted to make sure, because mass data was released earlier, how did our data compare? And Kathy is the math person, looked at a range of poverty around our range. Kathy, what did you look at?
So we, up on the Massachusetts Department of Education, we looked at all the communities that had similar percentage of economically disadvantaged students. So Cumberland is about 23%, so initially we looked at 22% to 24%.
Yep.
Because, you know, when the information first came out, they, you know, Massachusetts outperformed Rhode Island, so we said, okay,
You were in panic mode.
we were in panic mode, so like, let's look and see what these other towns in Massachusetts, and we know Rhode Island has 48% poverty, and Massachusetts has quite a bit less, so we wanted to compare apples to apples. So we were, you know, saying, okay, we're pretty competitive. If we look in ELA, Cumberland outperformed 11 out of 13, and in math, 9 out of 13. So then Tony said, well, okay, what about, you know, districts that only have 20% economically disadvantaged? So we dug a little deeper, and we didn't include that because our chart was getting too long. But Cumberland outperformed 19 out of 24 in ELA and 17 out of 24 in math if you looked at districts that had only 20% to 24% poverty. So in ELA, they outperformed 79%, and in math, 71%.
Yes, and if you look at our new numbers, 11 out of 13, I think, puts us in the top 15% related to those schools. And in 9 to 13 put us in the top 30th. And when I shared this with Dr. Leslie Laud, who works in 27 districts in Mass, she said, it is unbelievable what Cumberland is doing.
Can I just add one thing that I think is particularly important about this slide is, you know, and I was a little frustrated when I read the article in the Providence Journal, because when they released the scores, of course, the article was incredibly negative because you know, there was a very significant comparison being made between performance in Rhode Island versus Massachusetts, and the article actually had a bar graph making comparisons between Rhode Island districts as compared to comparable Massachusetts districts, and the Massachusetts districts significantly outperformed the Rhode Island districts. And they identified some of what have historically been some of the highest performing districts in Rhode Island. The online article was essentially the same article, but they included one other bar graph. And that bar graph was comparing Cumberland to a district, Plymouth, Mass, which has a similar SES, to us. So the point is that, you know, the article was so negative. There was one positive thing that they could have celebrated. The one district that outperformed a similar district identified in Massachusetts was Cumberland, but they chose not to put that in the print copy of the journal. It was in the online copy. So I'll talk a little bit more about the Providence Journal in a minute.
When you think about our performance, and Mass is a machine, we felt extremely relieved to see with schools with 20 to 24% poverty that we're right there.
So this next slide, we highlighted the column that we would like for you to pay the most attention to. This is a slide where we combined the percent typical growth and high growth. When you combine those two percentages, you'll see that Cumberland was second only to North Smithfield, and we edged out Barrington in terms of our student performance as it relates to growth. Again, all of our schools showed some strong growth. I think there are a few schools that should be particularly proud of their growth. In particular, I'm saying McCourt Middle School in particular. They had some really impressive growth scores. They have some things going on there that are in place that I think are foundational for moving the trajectory of student performance there in absolutely the right direction. So they should be proud of that. But on this particular district slide, we just wanted to show when we combine those two things, Cumberland was number 2 in terms of growth. Adversely speaking, we were second lowest in the percent low growth, which is a really good place to be. The next slide is a similar slide, just the comparison in math. As you can see, BVP is up there in the, when you combine percent typical growth and high growth, they did it extraordinarily well. They were first in the state there, and we ranked, I believe, 6th as it pertains to math growth. So we'll be looking at some math things from a curriculum perspective in the coming weeks. So what now? We wanted to provide a visual that sort of represents what we're doing and where we're going. Obviously, there's work to be done, right? So, and there are 2 paths that we are going to be taking. The work to be done is still a difficult one, something that we need to scale, because every district is going to respond to their data, right? And if districts have money, they may decide to throw money at responding to the data. We don't know, but we do know that every district is feeling the heat in Rhode Island, and they're going to be responding. So what is Cumberland going to do? Well, the first thing is to the left, we do have our curricular vision, and we included a link. The presentation will be placed on the drive following this evening, so you will be able to access that. If you notice at the base of it, there is the strategic plan, a link to the strategic plan, so that's the foundation of the work that we're trying to link to. Our curricular vision is not a static document. It is a live document. It's about 12 to 13 pages long. It includes every elementary, middle school, and high school in terms of the things that we're doing and that we want to do that we feel are going to move the district in the right direction. So that's our proactive approach. All right, things that are found in our curricular vision are our proactive things that we're doing as an office, as a school department, as building principals, every single day. And then there is the path to the right, which is our response. How are we going to respond to this data? What are we going to do with this data? And how are we going to respond in a way that's efficient to prepare students for this next round of testing that is not very far away? So we'll talk about a model that we had constructed in a few minutes.
So we'll look at this slide, and we've tried to summarize our successes versus our responses. And Our first one, I think, is really important. As rigor has increased, Cumberland's growth relative to other Rhode Island districts has grown exponentially.
And as we could see from the slide we showed you, Cumberland is competitive with towns in Massachusetts that have similar SES.
And for a second year in a row, Cumberland has outperformed neighboring districts.
And when considering factors such as SES and number of students tested, Cumberland's achievement level ranked among the state's best.
And I think many slides demonstrated this, so we'd like to state that there is a dramatic increase in proficiency rank over the 4 years of the Common Core state standards.
And both middle schools, North Cumberland Middle School and McCourt, performed extremely well in math and ELA compared to other middle schools in the state.
And most elementary schools perform well when compared to other Rhode Island schools.
So when we just looked at the previous slide and we saw the two paths we were taking, the first one, we're talking about responses, so what do we do now? So one of the things we noticed is we need to respond to our grade 4 and grade 8 data in math as it pertains to curricula shifts. We've already made some changes in grade 8. This was the first year students that took algebra had to take the grade 8 RICAS assessment. In the past, they took an algebra assessment. So there have been some changes there. We have a accelerated pathway in 7th grade so that they're covering 7th and 8th grade standards now before they go to algebra. In addition, the algebra course is also covering some of the 8th grade standards. We've also started some curriculum work in grades 4 and 5, and we're working again with Dr. Leslie Laud. We're doing a lot of work with differentiation and pre-assessments. And again, looking at the curriculum, because this has historically been a grade level that's performed slightly lower than the other grade levels.
In ELA, we're really going to focus on 3rd and 8th grade, and we're going to use the evidence that we have in order to continue to revise, and we're going to revise our curriculum, assessment, and instruction. The interesting thing that we found out at the state level is that grade 3 and 4 usually perform at a much higher rate than grades 6, 7, and 8. And when we do an analysis of grade 3 in relationship to grade level bands across the state, it's not true. So currently we're looking at a new K-2 program, but we're wondering if not next year, but the following year, that kind of structural change needs to be made. Then we need to dive in more deeply to looking at the curriculum, the pedagogy, and assessment in grade 3 that we currently have.
Okay, so to just round out our responses, we're going to determine what the district responsibility is in terms of responding from our office versus what the school responses are going to be. So in other words, what are district trends that we see across grade levels across the district? And what are issues that we see that are issues just specific to certain schools and certain grade levels? And what we have done is our data coordinator, Diane Arzamanian, is here. She's sitting behind me. She created a data sheet that there is a link. It's the final slide. I know Alex is happy because the slide's one of our final slides here, Alex, for you. When you click the link, it'll open up about 16 pages, 17 pages of disaggregated data, which you can access and look at. And we tried to think about everything. Diane did an amazing job with that information. And what you'll notice as you start to look at that is we have started to highlight things in orange that we feel the district needs to respond to, and things that are highlighted in yellow on that sheet are things that we feel principals have to pay very close attention to within their respective buildings. So we feel like we're being really, really specific. I won't get into this, but we also provided a model. We did some brainstorming as we put this presentation together about how we can use the specific reports and the scale scores that designate student needs and how we can respond to what those reports tell us so that their needs don't become a gap. So in other words, if they're providing us with information around what students are showing is a need, and we don't respond to those things, then in my opinion, we are contributing to creating a gap for those students. So what we have done is we've created a model that Diane is going to go on tour to all of the schools and present the model and talk about how we can help them implement this model at a Tier 2 level. And that concludes our presentation.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just one quick comment. I mentioned that, we were a little frustrated, when the article came out about RICAS scores, not just because of Cumberland, but I understand that, people want to make comparisons, and, Massachusetts is #1 in the country. So it's going to take some time, and that's the thing I think that needs to be stressed. People who, I understand why people are impatient because they feel that children aren't learning as well and as quickly as they should be, but it really takes time to change a culture and do the kinds of things that we're doing. And this is, it has taken us a lot of time, and this is not a mistake. The reason that we are showing improvement is because of the hard work. That being said, Tony and I actually met with Linda Borg of the Providence Journal today, and she called us earlier in the week because apparently people are starting to recognize the fact that Cumberland is a little bit of an anomaly in comparison to the rest of the state, and we had a really nice conversation today talking about the things that we're doing. And I just want to say, it's interesting. There are certain things that I think people, the team is pretty passionate about getting better. And I think the thing that I've always felt as an educator and as an administrator, whether it be at the building level and now at the central office level, is the tremendous responsibility that we have to improve the performance of kids. And, there's one thing that sticks in my head that Deb Rude said, I don't remember when, but I don't know if it was a year ago or 2 years ago, but she said, we have an opportunity, and when you think about the responsibility of this, we have an opportunity to change the trajectory of a child's life. That's a tremendous responsibility, and that's the sort of thing that we can do when we're good. So we have conversations about teaching and learning every day, at the central office level, and clearly lots and lots of work being done at the building level. So we are encouraged, and it has not been easy, and we've had there's been respectful discourse in the work that we have been doing, but that's a good thing. And clearly, this data shows that we are improving, and I need to commend publicly Tony, who really is the face of teaching and learning, because that's what he does all day and every day, and the good work that he, Deb, Kathy, and Diane, and Linda, and all of the administrators are doing. We expect that people are going to dig into the data and make data-driven decisions about what we need to do to help students improve. And this is hopeful, and I hope that everyone feels the same way. Thank you.
I'd just like to acknowledge that Mrs. Bolio, Town Councilor, former school committee president, is here in the audience tonight, and I can remember 5 years ago when we changed, we upset Mr. Bignano, and we changed the budget on the floor, and we started saying the kids come first, and we started with the interventionist in the schools. And to your credit, you know, we've continued to do that, and budget time as well, when we say we're going to hire these curriculum coordinators, and they tell us the cost, and we say we're going to do it anyways. And I just want to acknowledge that. You started a trend back there. The kids came first and spend the money, and we did something right. But go ahead.
Well, obviously, these results don't happen by accident, and I appreciate the somewhat humbleness of your presentation tonight, of all of you, and even Mr. Mitchell as he opened it up, and to say that we still have work to do. But let me just say, in your words, Mr. Damana, a couple of things. So people really hear this, that our trajectory is unrivaled. Our results are remarkable. This is a landmark achievement for everyone in Cumberland, and your staffs and the administration and the teachers and the students and everyone. And let's not be afraid to say that, to stand up and say, we did this. It wasn't an accident. We planned for it. It takes collaboration across the community to make this happen. It takes rigor. It takes data-driven decision-making. It takes money and people and all of that. And we've done it. We have gone, just to, I know you heard this, but I like to say it again. You know, we have gone in ELA from 17th to 13th to 9th to 4th. In math, we have gone from 9th to 8th to 9th to 4th. What is our goal in our strategic plan? To be a top 5 school district. Where are we right now? 4th, right? That's what you told me? So all of your analysis and all of your work and what you showed us tonight, and the fact that we are outperforming our counterparts in Massachusetts, who is, as Mr. Mitchell said, #1 in the state. And yes, we still have work to do, and we know that. What the beauty of that is that we know that. Because we are data-driven, we know where we need to put more effort. And we will continue to do that to see the same results across all of Cumberland. But the trajectory is unrivaled. The results are remarkable, and this is a landmark achievement. So I congratulate all of you, because this is something to be shouting from the rooftops. And I'm hoping that the Valley Breeze is catching this, because this is front page news. So thank you, everyone.
I just want to point out that I think we all agree that these are great results, but that there's a lot of work to be done, especially in some of the subgroups where, you know, they are not achieving the results that we want them to. So no one should get the impression that we're all, you know, sitting back going, oh, well, great job, great job. We know there's a lot of work to do, and I know that your departments are all taking care of that. The executive board of the State School Committee Association meets with the commissioner regularly, and at the previous meeting a couple weeks ago, the topic of the need for a statewide curriculum for ELA and math was brought up to support Common Core, and he was saying how different districts are doing, you know, different things with varying degrees of success. Although Commissioner Wagner did cite Cumberland as an LEA that has figured out how to focus their curriculum for achievement, and the results are seen in the RICAS. So the commissioner understands the good work that's being done in Cumberland, and I think it's important to know that we've been working towards this for several years now, and this is the results that we're getting. This isn't just out of the blue. This has been the long, arduous road that we have taken, which is very similar to what Massachusetts did. They set a goal, and they worked very hard on it before they even implemented the test. And one other thing that Massachusetts has that Rhode Island does not have is a guaranteed right to education for our children. It is a state constitution right in Massachusetts, and it is not one here, which changed the funding in Massachusetts and the way they handle things, and it's something that we may need to get behind in Rhode Island.
So you said that Dr. Laud said that what Cumberland has achieved is unbelievable. I'm going to respectfully disagree with her characterization. I think anyone that has seen the incredible efforts, the painstaking data evaluation, data-driven decision-making, professional development, curriculum changes, and the relentless pursuit of achievement in this district, I don't think it's unbelievable at all. It is to be commended, it is to be celebrated, but it's entirely believable that the group that we've got here, intelligent, dedicated, thoughtful, and hardworking professionals who engage in regular and meaningful professional development, all backed by parents and community leaders like Mrs. Bolio and previous school committees, who have for years refused to accept the status quo and have pushed to achieve more, that such achievements are possible. As Mr. Fiorello said, that's exactly what Massachusetts did. They were absolutely relentless in their pursuit and methodical. And that is exactly the way that your office and Mr. Mitchell and Dr. Thornton before him have approached education in this town. The presentation that you put together is, and you look at the Providence Journal article, it's exactly why Cumberland has achieved what it's achieved. The Projo grabbed the raw data and dumped it into an article and said, look, here's where you rank. You took the data, you dove into it, and you gathered the information that's necessary to find where we're doing well and why we're doing well, where we're not doing as well as we want to, and what we need to change to achieve that greatness. That's what gets us to where we want to be. That level of rigor, that level of investigation. I commend your office for it, and I look forward to what you guys come up with to address those achievement gaps that we know exist, and the fact that we're not going to rest on our laurels. We should all be very proud of what we've achieved, but this isn't a victory lap. This is the beginning of the next stage of what we want to achieve in this town. And I think everyone needs to bear that in mind when we come to budget time and we have conversations. This isn't the time where we lay off the gas and say, hey, top four, we're great, everything's awesome. That's not the case. We still need to keep moving the district forward. Thank you.
I would just like to say we don't get credit from the Projo, we don't get credit from the Valley Breeze on what we're doing here. Even today's opinion in the Valley Breeze is an insult to us. We do good work, we stood together, we stayed the course, and I expect it to continue going forward. And next year when we get our test results again, it'll only help us affirm to the public that we're doing a good job here. I would like us to see stop comparing us to BVP anymore, because we don't need to compare to them anymore. We're beating them. Thank you. Next order of business is, where are we? Discussion or approval for homeschool instruction request for the 2018-2019 school year. Mr. Superintendent.
I recommend approval, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman recommends approval. So moved by Mr. Hess. Seconded by Mr. Salvatore. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, 7-0. Next is tabled, the discussion and the vote for the first reading of the new policies. So we'll move on to personal recommendations. Mr. Superintendent.
Mr. Chairman, I have one resignation. I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the resignation of Dean Palmer, District Support Technician for the Cumberland School Department, effective November 30th, 2018.
Superintendent has one resignation. I need a motion. Motion by Mr. Hess. Second by Mrs. Waters and Mrs. Friedman. All in favor? Aye. Ayes have it, 7-0. Next is a vote on leave of absence.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have 4 leaves of absence. I'd like to share them, all of them together, if I may. I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the FMLA leave of absence of Brooke Borges, grade 5 teacher at Garvin Memorial School, with an anticipated leave date of February 17, 2019, and an anticipated return date of April 22nd, 2019. I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the FMLA intermittent reduced time of 0.6 FTE leave of absence of Christine Egan, science teacher of North Cumberland Middle School, with an effective date of December 3rd, 2018 through the end of the 2018-19 school year. I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the FMLA leave of absence of Jamie Sutherland, kindergarten teacher at Garvin Memorial School, with an anticipated leave date of March 1st, 2019, and an anticipated return date of May 28th, 2019. And last but not least, I request the advice and consent of the school committee on the unpaid leave of absence of Crystal Lee Trudeau, grade 3 teacher at Cumberland Hill School, for the 2019-2020 school year. Recommend approval, Mr. Chairman.
The motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Fiorello. Second. Seconded by Mr. Hess. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, 7-0. Next is school committee liaison reports. I'd just like to, say what a great job they did up at the high school and the middle schools with the performances that went on, and how are we going to beat that, when we get the uniforms and the kids up at the high school and the band, and it'll be unbelievable. Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Superintendent, do we have the executive session?
She missed her public comment.
She missed it, but I'll let Mrs. Bolio come up and have public comment. I'm reading the sheet. What can I say? We followed your template.
Did you forget to put it on there?
We knew you were coming.
How did I miss that? How did I miss that? Well, I just have to say a couple of things. One, congratulations to everyone, because it's hard to move a big ship, and certainly that's been demonstrated that you can do it. And as Mrs. Friedman was reading her quotes, I was thinking of some of the quotes that I had heard tonight and previously. I think the one that kind of got us out of our chair last year was, well, isn't 9th good enough? And I think Mrs. Friedman almost blasted out of her chair at that point, because I think it's never good enough, and what we should be striving for is to be the best. And I've been attending school report meetings since my 24-year-old was in kindergarten, so I got a lot of miles, and I can recall the reports being something very kind of lackluster and a lot of shoulder shrugs, like, well, why did this happen? But when you go to a school report night, my phone keeps shutting off tonight, and it's assistant superintendent starts with relentless intent, you're going to get a whole different delivery. And there's a whole lot more energy in the room. It's, as the school board, I always thought of our role was to apply tremendous pressure. And I think we did that in good ways and in bad ways, because I'm sure we had them chasing their tails sometimes. But that ability for a school board to be unified in student performance and outcomes, I think is tremendous, and you haven't lost that, and that's such an important thing, and you keep up with that. So, hats off to the school board for not getting distracted by things that become obvious distractions for a lot of us. I know Assistant Superintendent DeMano, when he started as Assistant Sup and started to talk about curriculum mapping, I was like, oh no, what is this going to mean? But it really meant something really big. And RIDE at the time, at one of the school board association meetings, mentioned curriculum mapping was something not to do. Well, you showed them. And one of the phrases that resonated with me tonight was our kids are growing. And you could say that universally, and it was demonstrated through the data and the results tonight. So that's pretty profound that we are growing, because often we weren't. And we needed to, and you've figured it out. Senator Pearson a few years ago talked about what was the secret sauce for schools, and you've kind of captured whatever that essence is. So, you know, I hope we can embrace it and share it across the state, because I think the entire state of Rhode Island can benefit from whatever magic, secret sauce, or hard work is happening. And I think to the school committee, when we started kind of roughing up the budget a little bit, and we started talking about creating layers of support, it was really a lively experiment. And it was a risk. We didn't know, and we were going to get criticism for adding more administrators, which was really always perceived to be a bad thing. But it worked. And so I think the secret sauce was part of the, you know, the formula that needed to be there, and to embrace that is a tough thing to do when you know you're under the gun for not raising any more taxes. And so hats off to all of you. I think, you know, the work done here is tremendous, and I'm really proud. I'm proud to live here. I'm proud to have my kids in school here. So thank you very much.
Go ahead, Mr. Hess.
I'll be brief, but while we're all very proud of what we've achieved on math and ELA, I think another thing that we need to be cognizant of is that these scores are not the end-all and be-all of what it means to be a successful, well-rounded student. And we know there are areas that we still need to invest in, the arts, the sciences, that are what enable people to achieve. This is great, but as we look at budgets, as we look at where we want to take our students, it's not just these test scores that prove to us as professional educators and as school committee members. It's more than this, and that's why we're going to be advocating for our students and for all of these other things that add to that educational experience. So the job is not done. We're very proud of everything we've achieved, but as Mrs. Bolio said, the goal is number one, realistically. Not number one for this funding level, not number one for a town of this socioeconomic, but number one. I mean, what we want, and what I've always advocated for, what the goal should be is what each student's personal achievement level can be. And that's what I've always advocated for. So, thank you.
John, I just want to make one notice tonight. I see Mrs. Goggin and Mr. Denon are in the audience tonight, and you did tell me about a week ago that we got a grant that Mrs. Goggin had wrote, and we got it from a court, and I just want to say thank you. You can come up and write them anytime you want, and, you know, we'll go from, actually, you were suggested, so you can apply. Thank you. Mr. Superintendent, is there an executive session?
Well, I don't know if there are things that we absolutely positively need to do this evening. I think we're good.
We're good.
We're
All
good?
right.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
To adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Mr. Fiorello. Second by everybody.